Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. As some of you may be able to hear and recognize, my voice is a little bit better, although I think I still sound a little bit nasally. So I'm still home, and I'm still technically ill. I'm sort of on the way up now, which is good, finally. But if please forgive any coughing and spluttering and carrying on that I might do throughout this video. Right, so today's video is about alpha males and alpha females. And what do we do with this concept? And now, this video was inspired by a viewer. Let's go and have a look-see. A viewer question, as the title of the video says, who inquired about this after watching the my video about emotional intelligence. And here is the question. Mr. Lewis, Mr. or Mrs., you never really know these days, but I suspect it's a male sort of thing, just if we're going to be commonsensical sort of thing. So an alpha male would be in what levels on your chart? Or can you make a video on alpha males on this chart and also the modern woman, aka aggressive woman? Right. And that is exactly what I'm going to do today. I'm going to discuss the subject of alpha males and alpha females, or, aggressive women, as the gentleman puts it. Um, Now, this is actually very interesting because I'm sure many of you will have noticed. So this is my tea today. I've got hibiscus, mullein, and hops, I think. Yes, delicious, and it's good for all of the lurgy. So, especially in the manosphere, right? So, for those of you that are not tuned into the internet and the social medias and stuff, the manosphere is basically the knee-jerk reaction that men in the world of men are having against feminism, which is what's happening in the world of females, right? And like most things that happen on the internet, it tends to be completely disconnected from reality. And because it is a knee-jerk reaction to something else, it tends to then, even though it might have started in the beginning for legitimate reasons. So feminism would have originally certain legitimate grievances. You know, the women were treated as property, they were abused, and all these kinds of things. Need more protection for women. Fair enough. Give women more freedom and all these kinds of things. But then over time, as the narcissists and the psychopaths begin to take over the movement, because narcissists and psychopaths, they like power, they like influence, and all of these kinds of things. They like telling other people what to do. They would then make a beeline for the positions of influence within these movements, and then they would eventually pervert these movements. And so today, regardless of what you might think of the first wave feminism and so on and so forth, there's a lot of things to be said about that. But today, there is absolutely no question whatsoever that fourth wave feminism is basically mental, is just rank mental illness. It is the mouthpiece for mentally ill women everywhere. Mentally ill women, misandrists. It is an utterly narcissistic, psychopathic venture at this point in time, and it is more destructive than it is helpful to anything, right? And so what happens is many men getting fed up with this business. Some of them legitimately. So men who go to court and get a raw because there's a divorce, because the wife has decided to bugger off with the garden boy. Pardon me. Um, and then she takes him for half of everything and takes the children, and he never sees the kids again. So, so this kind of man is legitimately grieved at the bias and the prejudice against men in the legal system, in the divorce courts, sort of thing. And so he would have been a prime target for the manosphere, for recruitment within the manosphere. But like every movement, unfortunately, however legitimate the grievances are, and there are legitimate grievances there, there is a lot of bias against men in the legal system and so on and so forth. Specifically, the law, the divorce courts and stuff like that, right? Um, Women can falsely accuse men of rape, of this, of abuse, all kinds of things, and they suffered zero consequences. Right? They can lie through their teeth, and there's no consequences for lying. Um, and and what there are, if you look at the news and all these kinds of things at the record, there are some women who do get nailed for it, but very, very few compared to the amount of women, the number of women that are actually do engage in this kind of practice. And so the manosphere has become quite large and quite a movement, on the online, in the how can you say, in the parallel universe that is the internet, that is the social media realm, that is the culture wars, right? The culture wars really happen in sort of like a parallel universe, sort of thing, where the vast majority of people never get involved, never get affected, and all these kinds of things. It's a very interesting thing to look at. But anyway, so one thing that has become very, very popular within the mano, and I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not saying that the questioner is for part of the manoverse or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. He's just he's just a random person. I have no idea who he is. So um, just so if anyone doesn't get any wrong ideas here, sort of thing. It's a fair question by someone who watched my video, and yeah, I don't know who he is, sort of thing. And by the way, sir, I thank you for your viewership, and I thank you for your question, by the way. Uh, and I thought I would just address it because I'm sick, I'm at home, I'm bored. I might as well do a video. And so, in the manosphere, one thing that has become very, very popular is the concept of the alpha male, right? And you see left, right, and center that the guys, and men in general, are promoting the idea of alpha male, a big uh, getting back to rejecting. And this is the thing, in some sense it's positive, and in other ways it's actually quite negative. So in the sense where it's positive, the manosphere is promoting that men become more masculine again. Men start taking responsibility, for they're sort of rejecting the weak, pathetic little soy boy, social justice warrior, that pathetic little weasel, sort of thing. They're encouraging men to become more independent, more handy, more responsible, to look after their health better, right? And then unfortunately, in some ways, it then starts getting a little bit ideological. So, with the promotion of the carnivore diet kind of thing, it's like this extreme. And so, yes, it works for everyone, but it is becoming very extreme in the sense where, like the vegans are becoming, that's sort of, it's the same thing. It's becoming, it's becoming, in some ways, it's devolving into something that's a good idea and all these kinds of things. And it's like, look at it, see if it works for you, versus and then it's getting to the point where it's becoming ideological, where people are beginning to bash each other over the head and stuff like that. And this is not what we want, right? At the end of the day, if veganism works for you, then go ahead and do it. And if the carnivore diet works for you, then go ahead and do it, right? It's what works for you, right? But unfortunately, again, because people have grievances, because people get hurt emotionally, because people are narcissistic, because they're psychopathic, they go into these things and they become very ideologically possessed, because it gives them power, it gives them influence, and generally these people like to tell other people what to do, sort of thing. And so the concept of the alpha male has come in and it's become very popular. Now, this concept has been around for a long time, but it seems to be gaining a lot more traction these days, of this alpha male and the alpha female. And now, where does it come from? First of all, where does it come from? The concept of the alpha male actually comes from studying animals, right? Wolves and all of these kinds of things. And they noticed that the pack animals tend to have a leader, right? And so the concept of the alpha male was actually a translation from pack animals, basically over to humans, which is illegitimate, sort of thing. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today to tell you that the concept of the alpha male and the alpha female is an illegitimate construct within psychology. It's not true. There's a lot of people that mess around with this, but we have personality trait theory, that explains. Now, the reason why it's become so prominent is because we do observe that certain people have good leadership qualities, and we do observe these kinds of things, right? Um, and there is overlap. There is an overlap sort of thing, but the concept of an alpha male as a construct is it's not well defined. It's not well, and basically everyone in his dog is going out there and is saying, "Oh, this is what an alpha male is, and this is what, and that's what an alpha male is," and it's been taken up in sort of movies, popular culture, and all that kind of thing. And of course, then these influences will have a perverting effect on in terms of what this is. Now, unfortunately, when we think of alpha male in the sort of typical sense, right? What most people don't realize is that what is being promoted as an alpha male is actually a grandiose narcissist. Unfortunately, that is what's being promoted. So when you look at the manosphere, you will see people, for example, like Andrew Tate, right? Is a narcissist, is a grandiose narcissist. End of story, right? And and what a lot of people don't realize is that the bravado, that hyper masculinity and all that kind of stuff, most of that is what we call in is what's called in psychology is compensatory, right? They're trying to make up for something, right? And the reason why narcissists become narcissists is because there's trauma at a younger age in life. At some point in their life, these guys were traumatized and they're dealing with trauma, and so the whole alpha male masculinity thing is trying to compensate and overcome for that trauma, for that injury, right? It's compensatory, but it's then pathological, right? It's unbalanced, it's and so on and so forth, sort of thing, and then this is the sort of thing that you get, and then as we saw not so long ago, Andrew Tate and his brother are now been arrested for illegal things and all that kind of stuff, and which is then typical of that kind of alpha male. It's typical for the narcissist and the psychopath to at some point end up in prison. It's just that's the way it is. And so how do we distinguish between what is a true leader? Because this is one of the things that the whole concept of alpha male is we're trying to look for the leader. Who is a true leader? Who can we follow? Who do we want to How do we identify a leader so that we can place these types of people in the right positions, right? And utilize, because the thing is, we have leaders in our society, and these people are a resource, right? You want to put these guys in the right place, right? Why wouldn't you? Why would you want to waste this talent? And there's all sorts of different kinds of people, right? That have certain talents, have certain abilities, and so on and so forth. And you want not only for the benefit of society, but for the benefit of the individual, you want to match these people to the correct environment. Okay? And even yourself, you want to know yourself, you want to understand yourself, so that when you go out in the world and you orient yourself, you can orient yourself in the direction that's most suitable to you, where you want to have the most success and stuff like that. Makes sense, right? Why wouldn't you want to do that? Sort of thing. So how do we pass out? How do we tell the difference between a narcissist, this alpha male sort of caricature, falseness of what a real man is, versus what is a real man? What is a good leader, and all these kinds of things? Who is the leader? So one of the things again that the animal behaviorists discovered is they overturned the idea that the alpha male is necessarily the one who's the strongest and the most aggressive. They found that this is actually not true. Specifically when studying monkeys and stuff like that. Because monkeys have sort of groups and they come in families and all that kind of stuff. Specifically chimpanzees and all these kinds of things. They found that the alpha male is not actually the one who's able to bully and overpower and dominate everyone else. The alpha male is, yes, he tends to be the larger, he tends to be the stronger, but he is also the most pro-social, right? The group, if the male chimpanzee, forgive my language, but I'm going to be candid, for people to just understand the gist of it. If the alpha chimpanzee is an asshole and treats everyone badly, what the group eventually does is they get fed up and they kill him, and then he gets replaced, sort of thing. But because his behavior destabilizes the social coherence of the group. Okay, and so what they do is so So you've got, let's say, for example, you've got the alpha male, and then you've got two or three betas, which are his lieutenants. Three lieutenants are always stronger than one alpha, right? So they gang up on him, rip him to pieces, and get rid of him because his behavior is destabilizing the group. And so we can see an analog of this again then within human societies, where the typical concept of what most people are considering the alpha male, why a lot of people want to sort of reject this in society, is because what people are describing as the alpha male is not actually an alpha male, it's a narcissist. And narcissists and psychopaths always, because of their behavior, they always tend to destabilize the social fiber and the hierarchy that they're involved in, what because they are pathological and because they're utilizing the structure of the hierarchy for their own selfish purposes, right? And this is why it's an issue. This is why it's a problem. So how do we pass this out? We go in. So the gentleman asked, how do, within my scheme or paradigm of big five personality traits, right, how do we identify the male, the true leader, and how do we identify the false leader, sort of the narcissist? Okay, sort of, shall we say, the white wolf versus the black wolf, shall we say, right? How can we say, Mufasa versus Scar, shall we say, right? Sort of thing. And so this is the thing. What most people are describing as alpha males today is, for those of you who don't know, Mufasa and Scar is from The Lion King. If you haven't watched The Lion King, then I'm sorry. You need to crawl out from under the rock that you've been living in. Most people are describing Scar. They're not actually describing Mufasa. Okay, and just in that kind of example, you can see the difference, right? Mufasa, sort of Scar, even though he's a leader, he just wants to destroy. And then when he eventually gets into a position of power, he completely destabilizes the kingdom, right? And this is why the old type of cartoons, they have the archetypes correct, whereas Mufasa is self-sacrificing, and he has a family and all these kinds of things, and the kingdom is stable under his authority, sort of thing, right? He's pro-social and all this. So interestingly enough, the narcissist is also pro-social, but he's pro-social for selfish gains, right? So when we look at personality trait theory, we have your big five traits, right? The big five traits are, or you can use the acronym of OCEAN. So it's agreeableness, conscientiousness, extroversion, so ocean, yeah, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and openness. All right, I just spelled ocean wrong there, right? It's those five traits, and those five traits break down into more sub traits. You can fract to get more specific. You can bifurcate these. So, for example, agreeableness breaks down into politeness and oh man, politeness and what else? I forget now, sort of thing, off the top of my head. So anyway, it breaks down into politeness and agreeableness, actually, or social. It's a pro-social sort of thing. Whereas, okay, anyway, so trust me to have a brain fart in the middle of a video, man, sort of thing. So let me take then extroversion instead. If you break down extroversion breaks down into assertiveness and enthusiasm, right? And then those break down further, sort of thing. So now, just to give you guys a concept of how these things are looked at, right? When you go and you do a personality test, right, you will then receive a score. Your score will be extroversion at such and such percentile, and agreeableness in such and such percentile, right? And that percentile means where. So when these scores are given relative to the number, how many other people have the same score as you. So there's a distribution in the population, right? And so if you are, say, in the 98th percentile, right, that means that you are so high up, right, that you are. So 98th percentile means very high, but then it also means there's very, very few people who are then more extrovert than you, right? Because you've got something that's called a bell curve. Most people congregate in the mean. And I've got a diagram here to show you. Let's have a look, see here. So here we have this diagram. Okay, so if you're in the 98th percentile, you'll be around here somewhere. Okay, so you find with a bell curve that most people, this is the mean. Most people will occur within the middle, right between that line and that line there, and this is sort of where the vast majority of the people are, right? So between this line over there and that line over there, you basically have 99.7% of the people in a population, okay, sort of thing. And then between there and there, you've got something like 67 or 70% of all people, okay, in a particular distribution. Now, let's say we're looking at agreeableness. So men typically score, right, in agreeableness about here, right, about here, okay, in the 35th percentile, okay. And then you will find with men, when you plot it out, men tend to be more widely distributed in personality, sort of thing, whereas women tend to be more acutely distributed. Okay, which means that with women there tends to be less variation than there is with men. Okay, so for example, let's say we were looking at, so this is for illustration only. Okay, so let's say men are typically more distributed. That means you have less men in the mean, and then you've got more men at the extreme ends. Okay? So if we're looking at agreeableness, for example, you will see that at the extreme men, at the extreme end, you have very few men at the 80th percentile, right? Or virtually zero, right? And then, but you see, because men are 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 deviated from the middle, right? From the 50th, from the middle, the average male congregate around the 35. So men can be extremely disagreeable. And down here, this is where you will find all of your criminals with it, because they're so low in agreeableness that they don't care about people at all. Okay? And so up here at the highly pro-social, you'll find again then very, very few men, right? Whereas females on average tend to congregate around the 60th percentile. You see the difference already, right? So females tend to congregate around the 60th percentile, and generally speaking, females tend to have less variation, right? But even with less variation, you'll see how many more women will be at the 80th percentile and even 90th percentile, highly agreeable. And there will be almost no women down here where the men are, you see? So in agreeableness, so of all of the traits, agreeableness and neuroticism are where men and women differ the most. Whereas, so let's say this is female. Let's say we were talking about conscientiousness. So for example, woman would be here. Pardon me. So let's say we were talking about conscientiousness. Woman would be here, and sort of men would be there. Say. So there's not a lot of difference then between male and female, right? But in extroversion and neuroticism, so for example, this on neuroticism, this is very similar. Women tend to congregate around the 60th percentile, around here, whereas men again tend to congregate around the 35th percentile down here, and then is widely distributed, or more widely distributed with men. So that again, when you're talking about um, uh, 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 neuroticism, men will be lower in neuroticism, which means that most men congregate around here, which means they're not very neurotics. They tend to be more chilled out and less of fearful and all these kinds of things than women. But then you do get those men who can be very, very highly neurotic, whereas then with women, you will have women congregating at the 60th percentile, right? For example, but then, and so then you will see that women tend to be can then in the distribution can get quite high neuroticism. So then they become like really, like they're crazy, the sort of thing. Not crazy, that's a wrong word, but yeah. Wild. So this is where most feminists will congregate, is in the high neuroticism here. Most feminists, because what do feminists typically say, right? Feminists typically say women are constantly under attack. Women constantly have to fear for their lives. So what kind of woman is like that? It's women who are highly, highly neurotic, means they're very, very fearful, sort of thing. So that is how these things get distributed. That's how we rank these things, okay? And so what would we expect to see of a true leader, of a man who is a true leader, versus a man who is a narcissist, who is not a leader? How do we distinguish the two, right? Because it's very easy to mistake the narcissist, the grandiose narcissist, for a leader, because he will talk the talk and he'll walk the walk, right? But it's the emotional and mental landscape that tells the difference. So let's start with what they have in common. Typically, a grandiose narcissist and a true leader will be very high in extroversion, trait extroversion, and specifically very, very high in what's known as assertiveness. They're very sure of themselves, they're very confident, and all these kinds of things, right? Interestingly enough. And there's also, in extroversion, there's also an element of pro-sociality, right? So in order to score very, very high in extroversion, you typically have to score both high in both assertiveness and enthusiasm. So they tend to be enthusiastic. Yeah, I'll participate, I'll go to the game, I'll go to the event, I'll go and do this and go and do that, and we're very social, okay? Sort of thing. However, the difference in the psychological landscape between the narcissist and the leader, shall we say, they're both high in extroversion. But the extrovert, the leader, he genuinely likes socializing with people, right? He gets energy out of it. He genuinely enjoys it. He genuinely, you know, it's socializing for socializing's sake, right? Sort of thing. Whereas the narcissist, he's pro-social because that is the only way he can get narcissistic supply. The social is his hunting ground. It's where he gets it's the place where he finds, where he feeds, right? So a lot of people make the analogy of people who suck energy out of others, sort of thing. So even though the true leader is energized by social interactions, his interaction with people, he gets energized by the social interaction, right? He does find a sort of replenishment from it, but he's not sucking other people dry. The reason why people like him is because not only does he take energy from others, but he also gives a lot of energy. He radiates a lot of energy, which is why people like being around him, because he not only takes, but he gives. He's very generous in that sense with his energy. He's being the life of the party and stuff like that. Whereas the narcissist, he's that guy who, even though he's wild and looks like he's having a lot of fun and might even be the center of attention, when he's around, he's a drain. You feel exhausted because of him, right? You and all that sort of thing. So he's there for himself. He's not there for you or for the group, sort of thing, right? And so this is sort of that the difference in the psychological landscape of the true leader versus the narcissist, right? The one who you don't want in that position. They will both be high in extroversion, but the one is there for himself. He just wants to take. Okay, he's a parasite. Whereas the true leader, it's a symbiotic relationship that you'll get from him, right? Sort of thing. And now let's take the trait neuroticism. Neuroticism is one's propensity for feeling negative emotions. So that's depression, that's anger, all of the negative emotions. Okay, now, men on average congregate, the mean, shall we say, the average for males is the 35th percentile. So it's fairly low, okay? And then neuroticism breaks down into withdrawal and volatility. And that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Someone who's suffering from depression, these kinds of things, tend to be more withdrawn. Whereas someone with anger issues, shall we say, tend to be more volatile, Okay, you just flip out and start a fight, start an argument, all these kinds of things. And so this is where you will see. So a true leader will typically be very, very low in neuroticism, right? A true leader. So even though most men congregate, so let's go back to the chart here, right? Let's go back to the chart. Most men will congregate, will average at the 35th percentile, shall we say, more or less. So 3.5, okay? This thing constantly harasses me. Right. So this is where most men will be. And let's say we've got a standard deviation of, let's say 1.3, shall we say. Okay. So this is where you'll see a big difference between the narcissist and the true leader. So a true leader will be here. Even though most men are there, the true leader will be one or two standard deviations away from the mean. And this is one of the reasons he can be so confident, is because he doesn't typically experience negative emotions a lot, right? He's not paranoid. He's not sort of thing. So your true leader will be down here, and you will find he is, say, so whilst most men are at the 35th percentile, you'll find that a good leader will typically be at the, shall we say, the 20th percentile and lower. So let me give an example for myself. My extroversion levels are, I'm in the 98th percentile, which means I'm very high in enthusiasm. By the way, typically women are higher in extroversion, right? Makes sense. We typically find that females, more than males, want to go out and socialize, right? Most men, if you're in a couple, if you're in a relationship, everyone knows the one who's like, sweetheart, can we go out, is usually the woman, okay? Sort of thing. Whereas men are typically, they're happy to stay at home. It's not that they don't like going out, but they're not as in that pro-social going out as women are. So typically women score higher in extroversion, right? But when you break it down between enthusiasm and assertiveness, women tend to then be lower in assertiveness than men, but higher in enthusiasm than men, okay? So if I take myself, for example, I'm in the 98th percentile, around there. Very, very high in extroversion, which means I'm very high in enthusiasm and very high in assertiveness. But then when it comes to neuroticism, I'm only in the 9th or 10th percentile in neuroticism. So I think one or two standard deviations lower in neuroticism than the average man, sort of thing. So I'd be very, very good in a leadership function, in a leadership role. Although I hate being in the leadership role. Now, in the social sexual hierarchy, they talk about the alpha, the beta, then so on and so forth, and then they've got one that is up there with the alpha, but is not part of the hierarchy. He stands outside of the hierarchy. He's called the sigma male. So the sigma male is typically not as pro-social as the alpha, and he's not interested in the hierarchy, right? Sort of thing. So he looks a lot like the alpha. He's not a narcissist, right? Because again, narcissists like to imagine that they're not that they're not. That's why you should pack the dishes away properly. So the narcissist likes to pretend that he stands outside of the hierarchy, right? But the narcissist, because he's so dependent on narcissistic supply, that it is impossible for him to exist outside of the hierarchical system, okay? Because he feeds off that system. He makes a beeline for the positions of power and stuff like that. The narcissist cannot do without the hierarchical system. So if you're dealing with someone who's a narcissist and he says, "Oh, I'm a sigma. I stand outside of the hierarchy." Rubbish. Impossible, right? Because he cannot live without the hierarchy. He's a parasite on the hierarchy. Okay? So the sigma, what is usually known as the sigma, he's got a lot of the alpha traits, but he lacks the pro-social dimension, shall we say. He's he's confident and he's, he enjoys a good time and all these kinds of things, but you'll typically find then he's a little bit lower in agreeableness. He doesn't really care about your problems. It's like, don't bother me with your problems, get lost, sort of thing. Whereas the alpha male actually cares about other people's problems, okay? Typically. So, let's continue. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. I really do for all of the sniffles and the lurgy. Right. So just to refresh, your typical good alpha male, the kind of alpha male that you want, he will be down here in the distribution, right? Very very low in neuroticism, whereas your narcissist will be up here in neuroticism. He will then be one or two standard deviations higher than the average male in neuroticism. So he can be very volatile. So, for example, we know, and not volatile, paranoid, right? We've seen those leaders who are very, very paranoid. Typically, leaders who tend to persecute people, are constantly looking for insurrection and all of these kinds of stuff, right? Very, very paranoid leader, Justin Trudeau, for example, right? Is paranoid, sort of thing. They're constantly seeing threats everywhere, right? Sort of thing. So that is the narcissist. Very, very high neuroticism, very volatile, emotionally unstable, all of these kinds of things. So even though they might have the high extroversion, sort of thing, a lot of that is because they're parasitical, and how can I say? So you can get narcissists who are also low in extroversion, by the way. So those are your sort of more shy narcissists and stuff like that, but they don't typically succeed in getting to a position of power because they don't have the assertiveness in order to achieve that, in order to fake their way through it, as it were. They're not confident enough, sort of thing. But so your narcissist with a high extroversion, he's a lot of talk but not much to back it up, and then when he's challenged, he has a meltdown. He does not tolerate opposition, sort of thing. Whereas a good leader, if you challenge him, he'll be like, yeah, you take on the challenge, give me your feet. He's not threatened by you, sort of thing. Okay. Then in conscientiousness, a good leader will then, so if we go back to the chart, shall we say, just as an example, so let's say there's not a lot of deviation between males and females. So I think in terms of conscientiousness, men tend to congregate. I think it's the 45th percentile, roughly, right? So your good leaders will typically be either within the mean or slightly more conscientious. So people who are conscientious, who are high in conscientiousness, they're organized, they follow the rules, kind of thing. And this is why someone who's a good leader, a genuine alpha male, he's very good at helping other people sort out their problems. He actually cares about other people's problems, and he's very good at sorting out other people's problems, shall we say. He's hardworking. He follows the rules. He's not typically one to break rules and stuff like that. He actually does like to abide by the rules, because the rules is what maintain the hierarchical structure, right? So the good patriarch, shall we say, follows the rules, obeys the rules, enforces the rules, right? You'll tend to find alpha males in law enforcement and all these kinds of things. They're very much, the rules are there to keep people safe, right? But it's not tyrannical, right? Sort of thing. It's not looking. So the tyranny will then be a pathology of conscientiousness. So you can get a narcissist who is relatively high in conscientiousness, because but this is mostly because, how can you say, he finds security in organizing and manipulating his environment. So a narcissist who's higher in conscientiousness is better at controlling his environment and organizing his environment in such a way that it gives him his sense of security and stuff like that, and it's his ability of manipulating others. So typically, a narcissist who's high in conscientiousness will put in, first of all, can put in a lot of arbitrary rules, okay, because he's trying to control people for his own benefit and for his own sense of security and his own sense of grandiosity. Okay, a lot of rules, but he will not necessarily follow those rules himself. The rules are arbitrary, and so again, you see this a lot within politics, right? A lot of arbitrary rules, one rule for you, another one for me. Whereas the leader, the good leader, a good proper alpha male, shall we say, a proper alpha male, not a narcissist, he will be high in conscientiousness, not and he will, first of all, he will not arbitrarily put down rules, right? But whatever rules he does put down, he will follow them himself. He will have that sort of sense of honor and all these kinds of things, and in some sense it can be almost like a handicap for him, because unlike the narcissist, he's sort of unwilling to break the rules, and so he in a lot of ways he can be tied down. And this is one of the reasons why the narcissists, and the psychopaths and stuff like that can look like they're more successful, is because they're not bound by the same rules. They can cheat and all these kinds of things. They eventually destroy the system, but until they eventually almost sort of self-destruct, they tend to do a lot of damage, because they fool a lot of people and stuff like that. And this is why this discernment is so important, sort of thing. So the narcissist can be high, or low. We couldn't really say that there's anything typical about the narcissist that makes him either high or low, sort of thing. They can be high conscientiousness, low conscientiousness, and stuff like that. Even with a good leader, right? A good leader is not necessarily one who's very organized, sort of thing. You can get very strong leaders. So when it comes to conscientiousness, ideally, you want a leader who's very, very well organized, sort of thing, right? But because he's not narcissistic, he won't want to control everything himself, and so he'll be very good at recognizing his own flaws. Because he's not high in neuroticism, he's very happy to say, listen, I'm not good at this, or I'm not good at that. And so he will not have any problem. He will not be threatened by the fact that he's not organized. And so he'll be quite willing to say, listen, I will then hire someone into my team who will be organized for me. Right? He will be very good at delegating things, right? And assessing people correctly for the right job and all these kinds of things, right? He's got no problem. Admitting that he's a weakness, and then bringing people on board who will make up for his weaknesses. That's where the good leader comes in. Whereas the narcissist will not admit flaw, will not admit fault at all, and when he's recruiting people, he will not recruit the most competent people. He will recruit whoever is willing to kiss his ass to give him narcissistic supply, who will prop up and support his grandiosity, his sense of grandiosity. And this is then how you see the difference there, right? Yeah, sort of thing. So a good leader ideally is within the mean of conscientiousness or higher. When they start getting lower, very, very low in conscientiousness, that means he's a lot more willing to break rules. So even though he's not necessarily inclined to criminality, he can, because of his own weakness or because of human nature, he can be willing to break rules. He can be a bit forgetful, and so you'll find that a leader like that, even though he might be very good at rallying the troops and charging down the front line, he'll be at the head of the, he's very disorganized, and if there is and if there aren't people behind him to help him organize his world and organize things, then he'll never really fully realize his potential, shall we say. And but this is why a good leader will always surround himself with a group of competent people, right? Sort of thing. And this is why we all need each other, because not everyone is. To find a leader that is high in extroversion, high in agreeableness, low in neuroticism, high in conscientiousness, high in openness, is stupid rare, first of all, right? For example, if you think about my conscientiousness score, I'm in the 98th percentile, right? That means out of every 100 people, only statistically, only 2 people are higher in extroversion than I am, sort of thing. So people like that are rare. Okay, or not as, sort of. I mean, you do get guys who are then in the 99th or the 99.9th percentile that get increasingly more rare, but it's not common, right? So, and then to get these very very high, all in the positive traits all the way across, and then low in the negative traits all the way, it's very very rare. So if you find someone with these leadership qualities, specifically the high extroversion and the low neuroticism, but he's a little bit lacking in some of the other things. So, for example, if we talk now about agreeableness, right? If we go to agreeableness again, men roughly rank about the 35th percentile on average, sort of thing. You can have a good leader who's within the mean, right? Ideally, you want slightly above the mean, okay, above average. So, for example, my agreeableness is I'm in the 45th percentile, so I'm about here, right? So I'm within the mean. I'm slightly above average, so the average is the 31st. So I'm slightly above average for males. I'm about there, 45th percentile, 47th percentile, if my memory serves me correctly. And then you can get one standard deviation over, sort of thing. You don't want men who are too agreeable, though, in a leader. You don't want a leader who's too agreeable, right? So it is probably better to have a leader who is within the mean or slightly lower than too agreeable, because a leader who's too agreeable will have a very very hard time in dealing with the kinds of confrontation that are inherent in that role. Sometimes if you're a leader, you're going to have battles to fight, and if you're too high in agreeableness, you're going to really, really, you might, to your own detriment, you might err on the side of not having the battles. But then what that means is that the issue, rather than being resolved, gets left to stagnate and then becomes a bigger issue later on, sort of thing, which is why in a good leader, you don't want a leader who's high in neuroticism and then very high in agreeableness, because then if he's high in neuroticism means he's going to be sort of fearful, right? Or he's going to withdraw, or he's going to be volatile. He'll just flip out, sort of thing, and not deal properly with the thing. And if he's too agreeable, means that if you're too agreeable, means that in a negotiation, you will be biased towards your opponent rather than for yourself, sort of thing, which means that in a negotiation, you tend it's almost like you negotiating for the other team rather than for your own team, which is not really good for a leader. So for a leader, while you want him to be agreeable, right, because a good leader genuinely cares, he's pro-social, he's got feelings of warmth, right? So agreeableness and extroversion are both the positive emotion dimensions. So you want him to be very very high in the positive pro-social emotions that are associated with extroversion, but you don't necessarily want him to be very very high in the positive pro-social emotions associated with agreeableness, because agreeableness is more of a feminine trait. It's pro-social in the sense of feelings of warmth to other people, nurturing, and all these kinds of things, more mothering, and all these sorts of things. And if you're a leader, you don't really want to do that. You do want to have that in a sense where you have loyalty and you want to look after the people who you are leader of, right? If you're the leader of your group, if you're the alpha of your group, you want to be concerned for people's problems. You want to have that compassion and all these kinds of things. But at the same time, if there is someone who is threatening the group, you don't want to be too agreeable, because you need to deal with this threat, right? If this is a threat, if someone is a criminal, and this is one of the perverting influences on with society that's become too feminized, is we do not deal with criminals properly, right? Criminals tend to get away with a lot in a society that's too highly agreeable, which is, for example, if you look at all the social justice warrior nonsense, you now find they're even saying that pedophiles, it's just a sexual orientation. And this is the problem with too much agreeableness, right? A disagreeable person should come to the point that says, listen, if you're a pedophile, you're dead. End of story, right? If you touch a child, you die, sort of thing. The death penalty, right? It's because of the feminizing, the agreeableness of society, the feminizing of society, that things like the death penalty and stuff like that are taken away. And so these people then basically are left to become a burden on society, and they keep on getting released, and they released, they go and they commit crime, and they come back, and then they released again, and they this constant rotation, sorting, rather than dealing with them in a very, very decisive way, which is a big problem, sort of thing. And then openness, right? So again, if we want to look at the over here, I can't remember what the mean for openness is, so I'm just going to put it here at the 50th percentile. I can't remember what it is, right? You want your leader to be as high in openness as possible, right? People who are high in openness, they find, so these are people with who are open-minded, right? They're open to new ideas. They think outside of the box, and stuff like that. They take other people's opinions on board. They find they're interested. They have many, many interests. They have a wide range of knowledge, sort of thing, which is good for someone who is a leader. And one of the key factors about people who are high in openness, people who are high in openness are more likely to be forgiving than people who are narrow-minded. And this is something you want in a leader, right? You don't want a leader who holds grudges. You want a leader who can forgive, who can get to a situation, right? Okay, there was a screw up, right? We screwed up. That's cool. All's forgiven. Where do we go from here? And he moves on, right? You don't want a narrow-minded person, and to be the alpha, to be the leader. You don't want this sort of thing. And then also people who are high in openness tend to have very high verbal acuity and spatial acuity, which means verbal acuity. They're good at social public speaking, right? They can motivate you. They're good with words. They're good with language. They're good at expressing themselves, and they also tend to be fairly good at helping you express yourself, interestingly enough. So they're good public speakers and stuff like that. And the thing is, a narcissist can also be high in openness, right? But then will use this to be manipulative, right? Which is then where you get all of your gurus, all of your life coaches, right? All of these life coaches, most of these motivational speakers. You have the power if you just buy my book on how to be successful, right? And so you buy the book, making him rich, and the book doesn't tell you anything that actually helps you become successful, right? These are narcissists. These are predators who are using their ability that verbal acuity, to prey on you, to sell you a lot of crap. So all of these people who are going around promoting the self-esteem, promoting the emotional intelligence, and you are the wonderful, and you are the great, all your greatness and your greatness, this or this. These are narcissists who are out to manipulate you and take your money. 90% of your gurus out there or more, they're out there to fleece you, right? These high-powered businessmen who you find on these clips on Facebook where they're really aggressive, talking about how to make money here and do this and that and screw this person and screw that person and stuff like that. And millions of people follow them because they're like, well, if I watch this person, right? If I watch this person and listen to what he says, I'm going to make millions as well. I'm going to be. This is a psychopath. This is a narcissist. They're manipulating you. Right? They manipulate. So one of the things that a lot of people don't realize, you get these guys who have channels about investing on this stock and that stock and that stock. Here's the trick to doing a channel like that, right? Build your channel up so that you've got like as many people as possible. 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, whatever. And it's easy because everyone out there is trying to figure out how to get rich, okay? And so this guy, let's say this guy, he now what happens is he's got so much of a massive following that he, by the mere word, he can then manipulate the value of the stock. Because if he says buy the stock, what happens? 10 million people are going to go out and buy that stock. Which means what? Is going to increase the value of the stock. And what is he going to do? Right? When it's at its absolute peak, he's then going to sell his shares, right? He's going to sell it. And then he's going to tell everyone, oh, listen, guys, don't buy this anymore. The value's coming down. And then people they start buying and they start selling. He's like, listen, sell now because we're at the highest, right? He's already cashed out. And then he's telling, listen, guys, this is going to start going down now. So what do people do? They start selling off and they stop buying, and then the price comes down. He's just manipulating you, is what he's doing. So this guy, if he's got like 10 million followers, he can literally choose any stock, no matter how worthless. No matter how worthless it is, he can go and buy I don't know how many shares. And then he comes on his channel like, look, guys, buy this one. You look, I've just bought some. It's going to start going up. And what do all the lemmings do? They start buying, increase the thing, right? And when it gets to a certain point, he cashes out. And it's just a cycle of manipulating people. That's what these YouTubers are doing to you. These are narcissists. These are psychopaths. They don't care about you. Stop listening to them. They only gain if you lose. And this is what a lot of high businessmen, and this are studies that have been done. All of the businessmen, for your Fortune 500, these stock market, these stockbrokers and stuff, narcissists and psychopaths, they don't care. These are not alpha males. These are not leaders. These are predators who are out to fleece you. These are the type of people that collapse economies. These are the type of people that drive inflation, right? Because of their irresponsible, because of their grandiose, narcissistic, the way they spend money, the way they manipulate stock markets, the way they manipulate other people, right? Your people like your Bill Gates, your George Soros, right? All of these people are psychopaths. These people are narcissists. These people are constantly screwing around with society, social engineering, manipulating the market and all that kind of stuff. These are not alpha males. These are predators. But because society today has got to the point where we've condemned leaders, good male leaders. We don't allow them to be leaders anymore because everyone's against patriarchy, right? It was the patriarchy that prevented these types of males from getting away with what they get away with, right? Sort of thing. When in the absence of a good, true patriarchy, predators can do whatever they want. It's, again, if I take you back to the Disney movie, right? I know it's a Disney movie, but the illustration's so good. When the king dies, what happens? When Mufasa dies, Scar takes over and ruins the kingdom in the absence of the patriarchy, of a good, stable patriarchy, right? The honorable father, the good father, the wise father. In the absence of that, the predator, the degenerate, runs wild and takes advantage of everyone and destroys society. And that's what we're seeing today. And ironically, most of the people in the manosphere today, this MGTOW, men going their own way and all this kind of stuff, most of these people are narcissists. They are grandiose narcissists. They're shy narcissists. They are psychopaths. These are not, you want to have nothing to do with these people. Stay away from all of this online crap, right? You want to find good people, do it in real life. Stop with this social media stuff, these groups, these activist groups and stuff like that. The activist groups never remain sensible for long. They always end up being psychopathic. All activist groups eventually become psychopathic at some point, right? And you look at all of these things. MGTOW may have started for a good reason. Now it's full of a bunch of idiots, a bunch of narcissists, a bunch of psychopaths, and the problem is the people who they most influence are young men, right? Who, because they're young, they're too stupid to know better, right? So men who are typically between the ages of like 15 to say 25, and they're influencing these guys, making these guys believe falsely that what they represent is what an alpha male is. It's not. These are just degenerates who are out to fleece you and out to screw everyone entirely because they have emotional baggage and emotional problems of their own, right? Boo-hoo, poor me, my wife left me and took everything, right? Because one of the things they never ever talk about is like, well, maybe if you weren't such a moron, you should have maybe chosen a better woman, right? Because this is the thing, right? On one hand, you've got feminists going, oh, men are so terrible. Well, sweetheart, why are you marrying men you met in a pub? Why are you marrying the degenerate who's staggering around at the pub? Of course, your life is going to be miserable with this moron. And it's the same thing with men, right? Men are like, oh, my life, women are so evil. It's like, excuse me, women are not evil, right? Your problem is that you make bad choices. You choose bad women. And it's the same for both genders. And this is why I say that these people are completely divorced from reality. Most people are legit people, right? But these people exist in a realm of vicious cycles caused by their own pathologies, by their own stupidity, right? They go and they marry and they get together with someone who's bad for them, who's insane. And then they're like, oh, well, then all men must be crazy. All women must be crazy. It's like, no, you make bad choices because you're a narcissist, because you're a psychopath, right? Oh. Fix yourself and you'll be fine. Sort out your own pathologies. Admit to your own weaknesses, right? Bring people into your life that help you balance out and compensate for your weaknesses, who mellow you out, who can tell you when you're doing something wrong, and you can listen properly and be like, yeah, okay, I'll change. Then you'll be all right. Okay? So to conclude, shall we say, the concept of alpha male is illegitimate. It's not precise enough to be of any use. So it's part of the social sexual hierarchy, the alpha, the beta, the whatever the hell it is sort of thing, and then the sigma. Even though they loosely can be overlaid with certain psychological parameters within legitimate personality trait theory, they're mostly useless. It's something that's sort of designed for like pop psychology kind of thing. And because they're so loosely defined, and so whatever the case might be, it's the sort of thing that's mostly used for rhetorical purposes. It's a good rhetorical device used by people who have the power of who have high verbal acuity and can use these rhetorical devices to manipulate other people and to basically talk a lot of crap online to make people think like they're saying something legitimate when they're not. When they're actually saying something that's quite pathological, that's false, that's just that, and so on and so forth. So, right, and also if you think about it, the narcissist is obsessed with being the alpha, right? A true alpha doesn't care whether he's alpha or not. He's just doing what he does. He's just doing what he does. He's not worried about whether he's the man or not. He doesn't, it's like, I am who I am. If you don't like it, you can piss off. And if you like it, hey, then we can be buddies. We can be buddies for life. He doesn't care. He's not constantly worried about whether he's at the top or not. It is the narcissist that's constantly worried about whether or not he's top dog and looking like the man and looking like the best and showing everyone else, right? This, you cannot possibly look at that and think, yeah, that is what a real confident man is. It's because it's not. Right? All of his confidence comes from just the comparison, that constant comparison sort of thing. And this is the thing. With narcissism comes a huge degree of paranoia and what they call a hypervigilance, right? If you're hypervigilant, it means he's constantly scanning the landscape he's constantly at where am I in the hierarchy and constantly scanning the landscape to see who's possibly a threat to him. A true alpha, a true leader, a good man, in other words, he doesn't care about these things. He's off wherever he is, doing his own thing, doing it to the best of his ability, building good relationships with people who can help him where he's weak, being loyal to those people, looking after those people, caring about those people, and establishing a good community around himself. That's what those guys are doing. That's what those are the leaders. Those are the true leaders in society. Not these morons who have these YouTube channels trying to tell you you should eat, you should supplement with testosterone, and make your balls swell to so massive, so you've got to throw them over your shoulder so everyone can see how big your testicles are, so you can tell, that's ridiculous. It's stupid. That's schoolyard. If the guy looks like, if when you're looking at the guy, one of your clues is like, Does this look like an adult or does this look like a teenager? Teenage bravado. It's one of your first clues, okay? Sort of thing. Right. So to conclude properly. A, a true alpha will be high in extroversion, enthusiasm, and extrovert, and assertiveness. He's confident. He's whatever. He'll be mid agreeableness. He'll be an agreeable guy, sort of thing, but not too agreeable. You know, because he doesn't want to, because he's willing to fight if he has. He's not going to look for a fight like a lot of these narcissists do, right, to prove themselves. He's not looking for a fight at all, sort of thing. He's agreeable. He prefers to get along with people, right, because that's how society grows and that's how society benefits if everyone gets along. Hey, let's negotiate, let's make a deal, let's, sort of thing. Not this, I'm gonna, this zero-sum game BS that people do. No, it's give and take. You benefit, I benefit, we're all happy. Peace on earth, yeah? Sort of thing. So he's agreeable. He's an agreeable guy, sort of thing. Not especially high, not especially low, but depending on the situation sometimes, and this is the thing, it always depends on the situation. The leader has got to fit his environment. You know what I'm saying. So in a certain environment, you might want a guy who's a little bit more higher in agreeable, and in another environment, you might want a guy who's a little bit lower in agreeable. It depends, right? It depends, sort of thing. He'll be high in openness. You want someone who's open-minded, someone who can think outside of the box, someone with high verbal acuity, who can speak, who can talk, who's good at communicating, and all these kinds of things, right? Who's prepared to forgive, who's prepared to hear your side of the story, right? Someone who's fairly conscientiousness. He's not overly willing to break the rules, right? Sort of thing. He's willing to keep the rules and not make arbitrary rules and all that kind of stuff. But also, you don't want someone who's so rigid that he can't be flexible, right? Because you do get people who can be overly rigid. So not stupidly, ridiculously high in conscientiousness either. You want someone. So for example, if my conscientiousness, I'm in the 77th percentile, sort of thing. So I'm in a good place in conscientiousness, sort of thing. I'm not massively organized. I usually get, my wife does a lot of organizing for me. She's really good. Also, I've got attention deficit disorder, so it's a problem, sort of thing. But, I'm organized enough that I can, I don't need someone else to wipe my backside for me. I can do that by myself, sort of thing. But, sort of more technical things, more precise things, sort of thing. You know, um, what else? And then very low in neuroticism. Very, very. You want him to be as low in neuroticism as humanly possible, right? Because the neuroticism is the only trait of all of the 5 traits where you want to be as low as possible, right? All of the other traits, whether you're low or whether you're high, they have their pros and cons, right? Or all across the spectrum, sort of thing. So with agreeableness, if you're too disagreeable, means you don't like anyone. You can be a bit of an asshole, sort of thing, right? Whereas if you're too high in agreeableness, means you're naive and you get taken advantage of. So there's a balance there, sort of thing. But neuroticism, there's nothing good in neuroticism at all. You want him to be as low as possible. You don't want volatility. You don't want withdrawal. You don't want someone who takes offense at everything. You don't want someone who's hyper vigilant all the time. You don't want someone who's going to read insults into every single thing that you say. Sort of thing. And you see that a lot in people today, sort of thing, because unfortunately today we live in a society where narcissism is the unifying principle in society today, right? Whether a person meant something to be an insult or not is irrelevant. People only care about whether they perceived of there to be an offense. They don't care whether offense was actually meant. If they perceive it, it means it's real. And so these are people who are living in a totally delusional world where if I think it's true, then it's true. And this is the kind of leader quality you don't want in a leader. And unfortunately, these kinds of people, because they're so delusional, they think that they make good leaders. And so because they're so delusional, they will advocate for themselves very strongly, which is then why we have so many problems in society, because unfortunately society at the moment is not very good at telling the difference between a narcissist, a grandiose narcissist, and someone who's actually truly competent and confident and all that kind of stuff. And one of the reasons, and there's many reasons for, but feminism has been one of that. The whole postmodern the whole all the postmodernism, the social justice warrior, and all that kind of stuff has essentially has criminalized competence and all this kind of, which is it's terrible. But again, it makes sense if you do an analysis on the kinds of personality that of people who are radical left wings. You'll see all kind is mental illness, it's Machiavellianism, it's narcissism, and all these kinds of things. So it's become pathological, sort of thing. So yeah, um, so I hope this helps, ladies and gentlemen. That it gives you what you need. Mr. Lewis Rivers, I hope this answers your question. Um, oh, and so you also the modern woman, aka aggressive woman. So it's this. Everything I said here applies equally to men and women. Okay, applies equally to both, because men and women, when you do the personalities, they exist on a spectrum, right? So, for example, I've met, even though women even though men and women tend to congregate at different places. So, for example, most women are at the 60th percentile in agreeableness, whereas most men are the mean, shall we say, is on the 35th. But I've met women who are more disagreeable than I am. Okay, so you get a lot of range. So at the end of the day, it's about the individual, right? Assess the person in front of you. Okay, so you can get women who make wonderful leaders. Okay, but what differs between men and women, a male leader versus a female leader, will be the choices that they make in those things. So, for example, a male leader will typically want to go into he'll be like a head of an engineering firm or whatever, whereas a female leader will tend to be a leader in the medical profession, sort of thing, because women are more interested in people, whereas men are more interested in objects, sort of. So so you will tend to find that their interests, whilst both might have really the all of the leadership qualities that are necessary, you'll find that then their individual life choices will take different paths. Women tend to congregate in the medical professions, where men tend to congregate in other professions, sort of thing. Sort of like, say, stock market, professions that are more combative, sort of thing, whereas women, because they're typically higher in agreeableness, sort of thing, you will find that then they will take leadership roles, but leadership roles which don't involve a lot of combat, a lot of I'm trying to get mine and you trying to get yours, and sort of that kind of negotiation. Women tend to not really like that, although if you get women who are very low in agreeableness, they might go for that sort of thing. So it depends, sort of thing. There is a lot of variability, and with the exception of agreeableness and eroticism, on the other traits, there's very little difference actually between men and women, as in so like with agreeableness, men are 35th and women are 60th. So that's 30% apart, sort of thing. It's almost double, right? Whereas in things like conscientiousness or openness and stuff like that, the difference between where the two genders, where the mean lies, the average lies, differs only by something like 5%, sort of thing. So it's not a lot at all. And the reason why in society we tend to think of men more like this and women more like that is because if you look at the bell curve, sorry, I'm going off on another tangent now, again, but this is important, okay? In society, we notice the behavior of people there and people, oh, go away. We tend to notice the behavior mostly of people there and people there, because this is where the extreme behaviors are, okay? That's where the extreme behavior is. We don't notice people here because these people are the average, sort of thing. And so depending on where the mean is, right? So if men are here, so for agreeableness, okay, the 35th percentile, which means, and women, so if you look, so let's make the deviation 1, okay, let's make the deviation, let's say 1.9, let's say, okay, so let's say we've got men here, right? So if you look at the agreeableness, see, men go all the way down here to They go all the way down here, right? Sort of thing in the distribution. So basically zero, right? So you can get men who, in agreeableness, they will score zero. But if you then deviate, so the average woman is here, is in the 60th, right? You see, you're not getting women down here at that extreme. You see? So this is where we notice behavior. It's not that you don't get disagreeable women. It's just you don't get women who are as disagreeable as the most disagreeable man, right? So this is why. So in terms of disagreeableness, and that deviation all the way down there in like 0 to 10, those are where all the criminals are, and most criminals are male. Okay, the same with conscientiousness, right? Women are slightly higher in conscientiousness than men are, but because that even though there's very little difference, there's only that 5% difference. That difference is enough so that at the extreme, there's almost at the very extreme, there's almost no woman. If so, let me make the example here. So let's say in conscientiousness, we've got at the 50th percentile here, right? So let's say women average at the 60th, okay? At the 60th. And so you see that a very, very low conscientious woman will be sort of down here, let's say 20th percentile. Let's, this doesn't quite lend itself to that. But so we've got the middle here. Yeah, we've got the 20th percentile. Let's say the most disagreeable woman, or let's say is down here. Let's say the 20th percentile. But if we shift that over by just 5%, right? The most disagreeable men will be down there, right? You'll have, so you understand what I'm saying? So you will have no woman down here at all. And also, again, remember, men tend to be more widely distributed, sort of thing, right? In general. So most female bell curves will look like that. So there's less wide distribution, right? More women accumulate at the average, whereas men tend to be quite a shallow bell curve, like that. So in just that 5% difference, so whereas woman will be, you'll never see women sort of lower than sort of the 25th percentile. Again, this is just to illustrate. Right? As soon as you move that by 5%, right? And men are more distributed, you immediately find that men are that on the lower end, men already are approaching zero, whereas women never get below the 25th. And so, right, but then if you look at the average here, even if you do that, right, that doesn't move a lot. The mean doesn't move a lot. So on average, men and women are mostly alike. Where it's at the extremes where women and men are the most different, sort of thing. And that is why you see most people in prison are men. Most people at the head of a Fortune 500 company are men. But then most nurses are women. Most psychologists are women, and all these kinds of things, because and we see this because those slight extremes really make a lot of difference, sort of thing, when we actually see it out in the world. Because again, we notice the extremes, we don't notice the people who are basically being normal and not interfering in your life, right? We notice the people that interfere in our lives, sort of thing. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's sort of where narcissists will sort of congregate, the different nuance. So it's not enough to look at and see, so it's not enough to look and see, oh, the leader is over here, high extroversion, because both the good leader and both the narcissist can be high in extroversion. So what's important then is what is the psychological landscape? Why are they there? Why are they? How is the extroversion being manifested in reality through the individual? That is where then the important thing. What is the motivation behind things? It's the why, and it depends on the person's own psychological profile. So this is a personality profile, but then the person's psychological profile filters through that personality. And so humans are very complicated. And that is why very, very shallow, one-dimensional things like, oh, he's an alpha or he's not an alpha, it doesn't tell you anything. And that's why these things within the psychological literature, even though people talk about it and stuff like that, it's useless. It's totally useless. We should, the whole concept of alpha male and alpha female and whatever is should be abandoned, sort of thing. Um, and um, and so yeah, so for the most part, men and women are very similar. Women are just as aggressive as men. Sort of thing. I mean, he talks about female aggressive women. Women are just as aggressive as men. Um, for example, if we look at domestic violence, all right, who initiates domestic violence? Women are responsible for initiating domestic violence about 5% more than men are. So women are just as aggressive, right? It's just how they manifest that aggression, and the consequences of aggression will then be different, right? Um, Sort of thing. So if a woman is aggressive towards a man, there's not a lot of consequences unless she uses a weapon to stab him or like a baseball bat. She can inflict a lot of harm. But if a man and a woman are unharmed, then aggression will have very, very different results, right? A woman can like beat on a man until the day, until the cows come home. She's not going to really do a lot of damage because men are a little bit more robust, they're a little bit stronger, and all these kinds of things, sort of thing. But if a man rails on a woman, a man can kill her, all right? He can kill her, sort of thing. Whereas in order for a woman to inflict the same damage on the man, doesn't matter, even if she's more aggressive than him, to inflict the same damage, she's going to have to use a weapon, sort of thing, which is often the case. And because of this disparity, right, because of this disparity in strength, remember, women are aware of this. It's why women usually resort to poison. If women are going to go after a man, they don't go an overly violent way like men would. They go and get in a fight or use a gun and it's very violent, sort of thing, because men can get away with that because they have the physical ability. Women will also be violent, but they will go with poison. They will go in an indirect way because they know if I go head to head with a man, I'm going to lose. And again, if you then remove woman from the equation, you think about man. A man who's weaker than a stronger man, he's going to do the same thing a woman does because he knows if I go to head with him, I'm going to lose the battle. So what will I do instead? I will either use a weapon or I will use poison. So it's not about even the gender necessarily. It's about what is the relation between the two individuals in question, sort of thing, right? And then genders obviously do make a difference because there's different inclinations and interests and stuff like that. But all these things come into account. So it's not straightforward. Anyway, that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it there because otherwise I'll carry on forever. Thank you very much. God bless. Bye.